Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. The y'all mean a revolution. Chickens coming home to roost. Epstein files have Washington shook. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. What Epstein files won't go away, and Trump is under pressure. Let's get to the content. Salute.
So is the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad blackmailing Trump? And what connections does Epstein have to Mossad? All over the internet today, a major publication is set to publish a bombshell on Epstein. People were speculating that it had to do specifically with Trump. Sources close to redacted have told us that no, that's not the story. The story is Israeli intelligence and Epstein. So we're watching that minute by minute. We will bring that to you as soon as we have it. Meanwhile, others are saying, in fact, a friend of the show, Judge Napolitano, Andrew Napolitano, just dropped this bombshell saying that, yes, it's true that Mossad is, in fact, blackmailing President Trump in order really to keep the Epstein files from coming out. Watch Judge Napolitano.
I think Trump's name is on the list. I think Mossad knows it. I think Mossad told their American stenographer, who happens to be the director of the CIA, who takes down and regurgitates everything Mossad told him. And I think that stenographer whispered it into the president's ear. And he's terrified that this will come out because he knows it will be the beginning of the end, whether there's a Republican Congress or a Democrat Congress. That's what I honestly believe has happened. Now, obviously, I haven't seen the files.
Also, ex-Israeli spy Ari Ben-Menashe, just a short time ago, now says that, yes, Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. He is an ex-Israeli spy, of course, working for Mossad, and says, yes, this is true, that Epstein was working for Mossad. Watch.
Because the mainstream media narrative is, we don't know about Ghislaine Maxwell. She denies all wrongdoing. And basically, Epstein was a pedophile and was a successful banker. He made lots of money. And he was a criminal pedophile, and he died in a jail awaiting justice. That's the story. Nothing to do with Mossad, nothing to do with Israeli military intelligence, nothing to do with Israel.
Yeah, they would deny it's a real bad story, and they would deny it. But he was put straight with the Israelis by Robert Maxwell at the time, a military intelligence, and started working there for them.
Started working there for them. He was placed there specifically through the hands of Robert Maxwell, of course. Harrison Berger is an independent journalist, host of No Tribe on YouTube. He joins us now to break this all down as we're watching this breaking news happening in real time. Harrison, welcome back to the show. Good to see you. What do you make of these connections to Mossad?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see you again. Well, obviously, I would say that the most obvious connection is with Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father, as that former Israeli spy just mentioned, was Robert Maxwell, who was this, British media oligarch, staunch Zionist, and someone who Seymour Hersh and Gordon Brown, among others, separately accused of being an Israeli spy. And immediately after it became basically publicly known that Robert Maxwell was probably this Israeli spy, Maxwell just suddenly and mysteriously died. Further, there's the question of Epstein's source of wealth. It's all very mysterious, but it appears to be with these Zionist oligarchs. I mean, I'd say particularly Les Wexner, who founded this mega group, this Israel lobby group, which their purpose, they said in the 1990s, was to influence U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and that's exactly what they did. Murray Farmer, who's one of Epstein's first accusers, said that Les Wexner abducted her, that he trapped her in his compound for Epstein and Maxwell to sexually assault. And then there's this question of, how Epstein was able to evade what would kind of typically be this harsh sentence for his crimes. And I say typically because there's many other powerful people that have been caught doing exactly the same thing as Epstein. And, they've been justly punished. I think Dennis Hastert is a good example of that. But Epstein, for some reason, was able to serve this very light sentence and walk away in this very unexplainable way. And according to Vicky Ward, which she actually just reaffirmed yesterday to Megyn Kelly, Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney that was prosecuting the Epstein case, was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and basically that he should leave it alone. And then there's obviously this strange relationship between, Epstein and Ehud Barak and Les Wexner, actually. Barak was practically roommates with Epstein at one point, basically visiting his New York City mansion that he owned all the time, at least 30 times, even investing in an Israeli surveillance company with Jeffrey Epstein. And at the same time, he was receiving all this money from the Wexner foundations for just these really unclear reasons. And then finally, there's, all the surveillance cameras and these tapes that were wired in to each of Epstein's properties that were exactly what one might expect to find in a, CIA intelligence operation. That's by no means an extensive list of the evidence, but it's certainly enough for people to say, as Tucker did, that, most people in DC do believe that Epstein was this Israeli intelligence asset. And the denials from the Trump administration, they're not even denying it, actually. They won't even address that question, which makes it, even more mysterious.
Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, polluting our air and water from pesticides, heavy metals, hormone disruptors, synthetic additives. These toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts right in your gut.
I mean, the most obvious one is that this does not look good for Israel. Israel obviously doesn't have good public support in the United States right now. The problem is that it's bad for Trump. At least 40% of Republicans are satisfied, but most are not. And the majority of the public isn't satisfied, according to the latest Quinnipiac poll that I just saw yesterday. So it's obviously to protect Israel. We know, first of all, that Trump receives all this money from the Adelsons, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's practically his base. And so for Trump to go against Israel at this time, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Of course, you're not really supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to say that, Trump, that Epstein was probably this Israeli intelligence asset, because as Tucker Carlson said, that's a naughty thing to do. But again, the floodgates are open, and this is what much of the public believes. And I'd say the other aspect to this for why he can't really reveal it is because, Epstein, when he lived his life, he was practically untouchable, which is what makes this disclosure even more difficult. It's just how well connected Epstein was to, Wall Street and Silicon Valley and all these other major financial institutions. Actually, Ron Wyden said yesterday that the government has possession of all these secret bank filings, at least, $1.5 billion in suspicious wire transfers that Epstein made, involving some of the most powerful oligarchs in the world. And that, of course, hasn't been revealed at all. Trump says that the people who have questions about this are basically deplorable. So I think just the connections that Epstein had to those powerful people and how it would expose Israel just kind of explains why none of this is coming out.
And do you put any stock into Trump's personal exposure?
I mean, there's all those videos that are really strange. They were published by NBC in 2019 when this first broke. I remember it. All those pictures, not just of Trump, but Bill Clinton too, receiving massages from some of the victims. It's all very possible that he's implicated. But I'm someone who, again, won't say you're guilty unless you've had a trial. Sure. But it is very suspicious and probably likely, I'd say. Yeah.
Speaking of trials, speaking of special prosecutions, we just learned from the White House, and the White House just confirmed that President Trump is not going to appoint a special counsel to look into this. So just, throw that away, get that out of there. And a lot of these connections have been reported for a couple of years. Whitney Webb and her great book, One Nation Under Blackmail, in volume 2, I believe. She really dove deeply into Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, as a known intelligence asset. She has maintained not necessarily Mossad, but Israeli intelligence, army intelligence connections. And then, of course, then others have covered this as well. We've covered this for years here on the show. Candace Owens has done a great job in all of this. But now we're hearing this rumblings that, a mainstream publication is about to kind of drop the bombshell. It's like all of us in like independent media, we've been covering this story for a couple of years.
I had the same question. What makes them all of a sudden want to do journalism?
Yeah, now they're suddenly going to do some journalism.
Well, I think maybe they're doing it now because they think that it's against Trump. That's why you see people like Hakeem Jeffries saying that now for the first time as well. They couldn't give a damn about it when the Democrats were in charge, and people like Bill Clinton were the targets. But you raise a very important point, which is by what when you mentioned Whitney Webb, which is just that this is not the first time at all that Israel has been accused of blackmailing the United States. And actually, I want to mention another academic, Aaron Good. He's done a lot of great work on this. So has Peter Dale Scott. But these allegations just really go back decades. Israeli and deep state kind of collaboration for this sort of clandestine activity. And Israel has, of course, admitted to some of it, but their official position, if you listen to them, it's repeated by Israel's, most loyal and devoted defenders like Ben Shapiro. It's that Israel officially stopped spying on the United States in the 1980s. But, everyone knows that's not true.
Yeah.
I interviewed John Kiriakou, you did as well, and he explains that, the American security state considers Israel to be one of their top national security threats on par with Russia and China. And, his testimony is echoed by, the NSA internal documents that were published by Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, which said the same thing, that, our strategic ally just aggressively spies on us all the time and is one of the top counterintelligence threats to the United States. And when I say this goes back decades, I really do mean it. The ADL was spying on Palestinian activists, writing dossiers for the Israeli government, working with the LAP to do it, through the 70s and 80s. It was unveiled in the 1990s. And then there's the allegations about another president, not this one, Trump, but Clinton. The Clinton administration publicly complained that they believed that the U.S. national security had been infiltrated by foreign spies, that they gave it the code name Mega, which actually is the name of Wexner's Israel lobby group. And the FBI put out this notice in 1997, and they said, yeah, we're being spied on, and they're probably giving it to Israel. And then you look at, too, Monica Lewinsky's testimony that she gave in 1999, I believe, to the Senate when she was deposed after the Lewinsky affair. And she was saying, yeah, Bill Clinton believed that a foreign embassy was spying on us. And, neocons like Daniel Halper have echoed those accusations separately as well, that the Israelis had all these tapes on Lewinsky, and that's why he signed the Iraq Liberation Act just very suddenly, starting a war in that country, exactly what Israel wanted us to do. And so, again, I think there's stuff there. It should be looked at, and you're right. No one has any questions about it. You guys do, but, corporate media doesn't want to look at all, but it's all right in plain sight.
Well, I mean, Ted Cruz, our loyalist to Israel, says we just spy on each other. That's just how it goes. Was his, so, I mean, this narrative that they don't spy on us is just laughable. Even their loyal puppy dog admitted they do, and he's fine with that. So there you go. There's your answer to that, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think would happen if there was irrefutable evidence then that there is this Mossad connection? And what could it possibly look like, the evidence?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it could be, because this stuff hasn't really been revealed before. It's kind of hard to prove. Whenever these intelligence agencies do this sort of criminal activity, they use shell companies. There's actually very great journalism about this. Like Seth Harp is a reporter at Rolling Stone that's uncovered a bunch of that, where CIA links to drug groups and whatnot, chartering different flights. Sometimes they'll match the the tail of the plane to planes that the CIA used during the extraordinary rendition program, and they'll match it to cartel members and that kind of stuff. So that's the sort of evidence that you see for sort of criminal activity from the clandestine state. But the problem is it's all done in secret. And this has just been the problem, I think, since the war on terror and really this era that's started in the 1990s, where we know very little about what our government does, and they know absolutely everything about us. They have Palantir lists on us, and we can't even get any information about this Epstein list that they've had in their possession for 5 years. So I have no idea.
Yeah. So was Epstein a powerful Mossad agent for Israel running a pedophile child trafficking operation to blackmail people? And
but the questions are incriminating enough. So even one answer, I feel like, would help us make a strong connection. So here we go. We're waiting.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eye on this. Harrison, great to see you as always. Thank you for your reporting on this. We're going to wait to see what mainstream media publication drops this bombshell in short order and what it actually.
Hey guys, Tim over in the Bulwark here. We've got some breaking about to be news, it seems like, regarding Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with Donald Trump. This is something that people have been buzzing about in media circles for about a day and a half now. And I try not to keep stuff from you guys, but I got to tell you, I've been hearing rumors, but they've all been second or third hand about this big Wall Street Journal story that is going to have new information detailing the extent of Trump's relationship with Epstein, potentially some notes that were shared. TBD. I don't exactly know the reporting. Don't want to give you guys unverified news. But what is verified is now media reporter Oliver Darcy, who writes the newsletter Status, is just out with a story just now, headline Trump's WSJ Epstein Fury. And what he is reporting is that Donald Trump is said to have personally called Emma Tucker, the Journal's editor-in-chief, to voice his objections to this story. The Wall Street Journal apparently has been getting heavy pressure to not publicize this story from inside the White House. I've heard secondhand that Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has been deputized to do anything in her power to stamp this out from the inside. The Darcy story gets into something that I've been wondering, which is whether Trump had contacted Rupert Murdoch, as the News Corp owns the Wall Street Journal, and Darcy says it's unclear whether he's done so. Darcy reached out to the Journal, to Murdoch, and the White House. None of them responded to his inquiries. But, like I said, there and maybe multiple different stories. I've been talking to different people who have evidence or who have heard that there are multiple different stories Wall Street Journal is working on related to Epstein, but that the big kahuna is this Trump-Epstein relationship story. Just a little bit of context here. I guess first things first on the news item here on what we know. If Trump's mad enough about this to call the Wall Street Journal, it's bad. They got the goods if Trump is personally intervening at that level. So that's one thing that I think that we can intuit from what we're hearing out there. Another thing is, this isn't that surprising. And again, I talked about this a little with David Wallace Wells, which was an awesome interview. I know everyone wants to do Epstein stuff all day, and we were doing a very long climate interview, but we also get into Epstein a little bit. So go check out the David Wallace Wells interview. It's awesome. He's really smart on climate stuff. But anyway, we were talking about this, and Trump did break up his relationship with Epstein for unknown reasons in 2004, before he was first arrested.
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
That said, like they had a deep relationship in the 15 prior years. You know, during some of that time, Trump was single or cheating on wives or between marriages. Trump dated younger women. You know, something I was reminded of today back in is Trump dated a 19-year-old tennis star when he was in his 40s. And that's what was public at the time. So, you know, him and Epstein's proclivities are not too dissimilar, so to speak. I mean, I don't want to make a false accusation there. Obviously, Epstein's proclivities, we know by evidence, reach down into underage girls. So, but you know, liking younger women, liking borderline 19-year-old people on the borderline, totally allowed. But again, shouldn't be that surprising that these two guys had that kind of relationship. They had an even deeper relationship than we're aware of, I guess would be a way of putting it. Like they both lived in South Florida. They both lived in New York. They, Epstein said he was his best friend for a while. Trump talked about the extent of the relationship, 15 years. It's on the Epstein side of this is on tape. So, the fact that there's like other correspondence, other evidence of the relationship beyond kind of those same quotes that we've been showing you from the New York Magazine story and others, the same pictures and the same parties. Again, it's not that surprising. It's a little surprising it hasn't come out before now, but like this happens when you get into a firestorm, new stuff comes to the surface. I've been involved in that on both sides of being a PR person on the incoming of a firestorm, representing my candidates, or trying to create more of a firestorm for opposing candidates. So you see this. It seems like more stuff is coming. We've been hearing about it, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with you until it was a little better sourced than just the rumor mill says that the Wall Street Journal is working on a story. But now we have a reported story from Oliver Darcy, a good media reporter, saying that this is coming. Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye out for it, and we'll be keeping you guys posted as things develop in this
All right, we have some major breaking news. The Wall Street Journal just dropped an absolute bomb with more details about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's sketchy relationship. Now, we knew something was simmering. We heard the Trump admin was trying to squash a story coming out of the Wall Street Journal, and this was the story. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship has been rather mysterious, but it hasn't been secretive. Not at all. There are 100 photos of them together. Jeffrey Epstein said Trump was his best friend for 10 years. Trump said Epstein is a great guy and he's known him for 15 years. So the relationship was not secretive. But I would say there are still mysteries about their relationship that we are now getting uncovered through this article. This reads, Jeffrey Epstein's friends sent him bawdy letters for a 50th birthday album. One was from Donald Trump. The leather-bound book was compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell. The president says the letter, quote, is a fake thing. Remember, the White House was trying to squash this story before it even came out, so Trump knows that this is real. The letter is not fake. I'm surprised he's not saying it was made up by Obama, even though it was sent back in 2003. Now, the contents of this letter will make it very clear why Donald Trump did not want this story released. In this letter, Donald Trump seems to have hand-drawn multiple lewd, dirty images directed at Epstein, almost implying that Trump knows about Epstein's sexual degeneracy. I feel like that's a light way of putting it. It's not just sexual degeneracy. He raped underage girls. It is disgusting, and Donald Trump seems to have been making references to that in this letter. Let's break it down, and you can decide for yourself. Make sure you drop a like, and make sure you subscribe to the Adam Mockler feed. We have been covering this relentlessly, and will continue to. This reads, it was Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday, and Ghislaine Maxwell was preparing for a special gift to mark the occasion. She turned to Epstein's family and friends. One of them was Donald Trump. Maxwell collected letters from Trump and dozens of Epstein's other associates for a 2003 birthday album, according to documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Pages from the leather-bound album, assembled before Epstein was first arrested in 2006, are among the documents examined by the Justice Department officials who have investigated Epstein and Maxwell years ago, according to people who have reviewed the pages. It's unclear if any of the pages are a part of the Trump admin's recent review, but I use the words recent review lightly because I don't know how deeply they went through it. I'm pretty sure Pam Bondi saw that Trump's name was littered throughout and was just like, yeah, we're not going to release this. We're going to send out a memo saying it doesn't exist. Then it says, the president's past relationship with Epstein is at a sensitive moment. The Justice Department documents, which people call the Epstein files, and who or what is in them are at the center of a storm consuming the Trump admin. On Wednesday, after angry comments about how the files are a hoax created by Democrats, President Trump lashed out at his own supporters and lost a lot of goodwill. Now this reads, the letter bearing Trump's name, which was reviewed by the Journal, is bawdy. It's dirty, like others in the album. And this is the thing. Do I make like dirty jokes to my friends or like draw penises and like send it to them? Sure, I'm whatever. But this is different. This is a sexual offender or somebody who is raping young girls behind the scenes, and Donald Trump was partying with him, pointing at girls at parties. You guys know the clip I'm talking about, where they're pointing at girls, and you are sending sexual innuendos to a child rapist? That is disgusting. That is disgusting. Sorry, to continue though. The letter bearing Trump's name is bawdy, like others in the album. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breast, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breasts, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. The letter concludes, "Happy birthday, and may every other day be a wonderful secret." Okay, wait, I take that back. I said I make dirty jokes to my friends, but I've never done anything that fucking weird, like an actual photo that seems very, very odd. And also, dude, this is a sexual predator that you are making sexual jokes to. This is not okay. To continue, in an interview with the Journal on Tuesday evening, Trump denied writing the letter or drawing the picture. Quote, "This is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story," he said. Very well said. Quote, "I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women," he said. "It's not my language. It's not my words." Yeah, because one thing we know about Trump is that he's amazing with using his words. Honestly, it wouldn't even surprise me if Trump had somebody else draw it, but still, the entire concept of Donald Trump sending lewd innuendos to somebody who is actively raping young girls while Donald Trump is flying around on his jet being buddy-buddy and pointing out girls. You guys see the image that's coming together here. And I haven't even referenced the fact that Epstein died under Trump. Donald Trump fired the prosecutor who investigated Epstein. Pam Bondi has lied about the list. I haven't even touched on all of that. We're just talking about their relationship going back. Allegations that Epstein had been sexually abusing girls became public in 2006, and he was arrested that year. Notice the wording. It became public in 2006, but people knew. People knew. Just like Harvey Weinstein, people knew. Epstein died in 2019 in jail after he was arrested a second time and charged with sex trafficking conspiracy. Justice Department officials didn't respond to requests for comments or address questions about whether the Trump page and other pages of the birthday album were part of the agency's recent documents review. The FBI declined to comment entirely. The existence of the album and the contents of the birthday letters haven't previously been reported. The album had poems, photos, and greetings from business people, academics, Epstein's former girlfriends, and childhood pals, according to documents reviewed by the Journal and people familiar with them. So let me get this straight. Ghislaine Maxwell came to Donald Trump while she was engaged in a sex trafficking scheme of young girls. She came to Donald Trump and said, "I want you to write a letter for our buddy Jeffrey Epstein," even though Jeffrey Epstein is leading the sex trafficking ring. Donald Trump takes it and goes, "You know what? I will write a letter to this sexual predator who, at the time he hadn't actually been convicted, but I'm sure people knew." Trump goes, "I'm going to write a sexual letter, like a sexual photo to this guy who is an absolute pervert. It is disgusting." This is like me being friends with Jeffrey Dahmer, but claiming I didn't even know that he was a murderer. And then years later, you find out that I wrote him a picture and it's like a human head on a platter. It's like, okay, you knew, dude. You knew. Kind of a rough analogy, but you guys get the idea. The album had poems, photos, and greetings. Among those who submitted letters were billionaire Leslie Wexner and attorney Alan Dershowitz. The album also contained a letter from a now-deceased Harvard economist, one of Epstein's report cards from Mark Twain Jr. High School in Brooklyn, and a note from a former assistant that included an acrostic with Epstein's name, Jeffrey, oh Jeffrey, everyone loves you, fun in the sun, fun just for fun. Remember, don't forget me soon. Epstein, you rock. You are the best. Okay, so this person at least didn't do some weird sexual shit in the letter, but still, Epstein was Wexner's money manager at the time. The longtime leader of Victoria's Secret wrote a short message that said, I wanted you to get what you want, so here it is. After the text was a line drawing of what appeared to be a woman's breasts. Wexner declined to comment through a spokesman. Wexner's spokesman previously told the Journal that the retail mogul, quote, severed all ties with Epstein in 2007 and never spoke with him again. Dershowitz's letter included a mock-up of a Vanity Unfair magazine cover with mock headlines such as, who was Jack the Ripper? Was it Jeffrey Epstein? He joked that he had convinced the magazine to change the focus of an article from Epstein to Bill Clinton. This is where it gets more interesting, though. It wasn't clear how the letter with Trump's signature was prepared. Inside the outline of a naked woman was a typewritten note styled as an imaginary conversation between Trump and Epstein, written in the third person. Voiceover. There must be more to life than having everything, the note begins. Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey says, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald says, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey says, yes, we do. Come to think of it. Donald says, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey said, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Trump says, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. What does this mean? It is time to keep the pressure on, never back down, and double down on exposing them. I'm going to make more videos about
No more investigations into Epstein. No special prosecutor. Trump is tripling, quadrupling down on the idea that it's all a big hoax, despite a lot of his party campaigning on this.
It was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
That's right. If you care about accountability for a trafficking ring, you're doing the work of the Democrats, apparently, and Trump doesn't want your support. This is another post from Truth Social where Trump says that it's a scam. We will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, despite him being one of the people heavily trafficking in this, and saying my past supporters have bought into this hook, line, and sinker, clearly saying if you care about the release of the Epstein files, you're not a real supporter of Trump anymore. You're a past supporter, saying about his own supporters, let these weaklings continue because I don't want their support anymore. This obviously felt like a huge betrayal to a lot of the people who have supported Trump and expected him to come through on this promise. The last thing most of them were holding on to was the idea of a special prosecutor who could go into the Epstein case and try to get some transparency. In fact, it was reported that Donald Trump was okay with appointing a special prosecutor. This was according to John Solomon, who claimed this in an interview.
Any prompting, without me even asking yet, he says, I also think if that has a special prosecutor, that prosecutor should just look at anything credible about Jeffrey Epstein, and let's get this resolved. Let's get the American people the most transparency. Now, what does that mean? If there's a special prosecutor, this gets out of Pam Body's hands, it goes to an independent person. They look at it, they release what they can about it, and they tell the American people whatever the grand jury can squeeze out of it.
Now, this had many people saying, oh, this is great news. This will bring accountability, transparency. Here's Benny Johnson talking about it.
There's been a dramatic change in approach. Very powerful people inside the administration are pushing for a special counsel, full press briefings on Epstein findings, and so on. And this is because of our voices that cannot be ignored.
Right. Voices that cannot be ignored. Except they were just today by Caroline Leavitt, who says Trump is not in favor of a special prosecutor at all. It's not going to happen.
The president said that he floated the idea of a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. Can you confirm that? And has he asked the attorney general to do this, to appoint a special prosecutor to look it over?
Well, the idea was floated from someone in the media to the president. The president would not recommend a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. That's how he feels. And as for his discussions with the attorney general, I'm not sure.
Wow. That's how he feels. He feels like, we don't need more transparency. We don't need more accountability. We need to hush this up. Okay. Trump has also responded when asked that he has nothing to do with a special investigation.
President Trump, would you consider appointing a special counsel to investigate the Jeffrey Epstein investigation?
I have nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it, guys. We've already done the investigation, and you should be pleased with what we put out. This was also said by Trump himself, the idea that we've already given you everything credible.
She says, I gave you all the credible information. And if she finds any more credible information, she'll give that too. What more can she do than that?
Right. She's given us all the credible information. If she finds more, she will give us more. But we already got it. If you remember, Pam Bondi already gave us the phase 1, which just included a lot of already released information. At the time, they called this the first phase, which sheds light on Epstein's extensive network. An extensive network that now includes 2 people, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Really extensive. Kash Patel, by the way, quoted saying there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, except, of course, all the incredible information, right? You have credible information, you have incredible information that they're going to hide from us, I guess. With these influencers who had the binder, I guess this is part of the Democrat hoax. Can't understand why they would do that. Now, as a rewind, though, what has really the FBI DOJ released that wasn't already public? Well, one of the biggest things was the tape, right? The tape of the prison cell, which actually wasn't the prison cell. It was the common area, which couldn't see Epstein's cell, which definitively proves everything. Except not only did it not show Epstein's cell, not only were there blind spots in the tape, we also had a Wired report showing that it was a modified file. This was something that went into Premiere Pro, was saved multiple times. We don't know what was changed, if anything. But now we have new reporting from Wired saying that Epstein's prison video had nearly 3 minutes cut out, which started at the, quote, missing minute. So I ask again, what credible information has really been released? The only thing that's been released is, ironically, not credible. Not only is this great for people like Prince Andrew, who's now traveling around, guess who else this is great for? Ghislaine Maxwell, who's now appealing her whole conviction on the grounds that the government already gave her a non-prosecution agreement, or more specifically, Epstein a non-prosecution agreement. And we have this statement from Ghislaine Maxwell's family and her counsel of record saying, quote, "I'd be surprised if President Trump knew his lawyers were asking the Supreme Court to let the government break a deal. Judges have previously dismissed her lawyers' arguments that she should have never been prosecuted because of a weird agreement drafted more than 15 years ago. But now, of course, this is at play again, given all the recent revelations and the fact that the family seems pretty directly to be appealing to Trump, which is an interesting turn of events if Maxwell has anything on him or someone else in power. They actually say explicitly he's the ultimate deal maker, and I'm sure he'd agree when the United States gives its word, it should keep it. With all the talk about who's being prosecuted and who isn't, it's especially unfair that Ghislaine Maxwell remains in prison based on a promise that the U.S. government made and broke. This itself raises large concerns, given that Trump not only seems to want the Epstein thing to go away, but also that he's wished Maxwell well many times.
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. She's now in jail. Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. Good luck. Let them prove somebody was guilty.
So pretty clearly, the president seems to be extending his sympathies to Maxwell in very bizarre terms when asked, hey, do you think this person's going to turn in rich and powerful people? Well, we wish her well. So that worries me. When then the Maxwell family and her lawyer are pretty explicitly appealing to the president, who wished her well, saying, hey, this whole thing should be barred because of Epstein's former agreement with the prosecutors. Speaking of prosecutors, by the way, Maureen Comey was just fired by the DOJ, with many speculating this is an order that comes from the top, from Trump. Now, Maureen was the prosecutor in the Diddy, Epstein, and Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell cases. with some people saying the timing is too coincidental with the whole Epstein investigation and Maureen Comey maybe knowing something about it. The other way to look at this is, of course, that Trump has hated James Comey, her father, for a very long time. James Comey, of course, doesn't seem to like Trump too much. He recently published a photo of Seychelles saying 8647, referring to the 47th president of the United States. So it could be the case this is a revenge firing. It could be over the handling of the Diddy trial. Or, again, it could be over the Epstein-Maxwell cases. But on the whole, what we all want is just more accountability, more transparency. We want these people to release the full files. So on that, I'm going to explore a couple leads that maybe will pan out. There's been a push by the House to have the Epstein files released. This has now become a bipartisan supported thing. Previously, it was voted against, but now they're trying to force a vote. I've kind of stated that I'm not sure that this is going to get somewhere. I hope it does, though, just to be clear. I hope they release it. I think it's been covered up for so long. I guess I'm so cynical about it. But I guess in the words of Trump, I wish them well. We wish the House well in trying to release it. I will say for the millionth time, this is not a left or right issue. This is the people versus the else. There's also this report from the New York Times about the $1.5 billion they're trying to chase down. This was handled by JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank. These both paid fines for their involvement in moving money for Jeffrey Epstein. Here, the legislators are trying to actually chase down some of the funds. Notably, the New York Times reports that there was a huge suspicious activity report, also called a SAR, reviewed by the congressional team that was filed in late 2019 by JP Morgan for $1.1 billion. The report covered 4,700 transactions dating back to 2003, including payments to women from Belarus, Russia, Turkmenistan. Many of Epstein's victims included young women from Eastern European countries. So I will say, as many people have, follow the money is a great idea in a case like this, where Jeffrey Epstein had a bunch of mysterious wealth. Unfortunately, I have to say it's an uphill battle when the most powerful person in America, Donald Trump, seems dead set on closing these files and trying to get it to all go away. And I also encourage people to be suspicious of when a president says something is a hoax, despite the fact he said for years there are powerful people implicated in these files. Even saying that he was going to be transparent, there was going to be a wave of accountability, only now they're covering it all up. They want you to trust them, and if you don't, you're stupid and or a weakling.
The Wall Street Journal published a piece with the
All right, well, here's an update to the latest Epstein saga. Ghislaine Maxwell, his madam or his girlfriend or his fixer or his Mossad handler, whatever you might think of her, she says she's ready to come forward and tell Congress everything about the Epstein files. That is the latest that has come out. She's not being asked, but she says, I will come out and I will tell Congress absolutely everything about the Epstein files. I want to remind you of one thing she said about Epstein killing himself. She said he absolutely, in her opinion, did not kill himself.
Do you believe that he committed suicide? Because many don't.
No, he didn't. I don't believe he did. I believe that he was murdered.
So she believes that he was murdered. Now, will Ghislaine come to Congress and actually say, yes, there was a huge pedo ring and we have blackmail on every last one of you? I think that the obvious answer is no. Ghislaine Maxwell now is trying to get out of prison. She's serving 20 years for sex trafficking of minors. And now that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has come out saying there are no Epstein files, it was all a hoax. And you've got the DOJ and the FBI saying, yep, there's nothing to see here. Ghislaine Maxwell is seeing her chance at freedom right now. And she is appealing her conviction. So if she were to come to Congress, what do you think Ghislaine would say? Do you think she'd say, yes, actually, there was a pedo ring And yes, I was in on it. And yes, I am a Mossad agent, and my father was, and I recruited Epstein because he was a big pervert, and we could make him, we could get him into the social circles with all these other men. And yes, it's all true. That's what happened. And here are all the names. I mean, of course, that is not what's going to happen. She's going to come out and say, yep, you know what? You guys heard it from the DOJ, the FBI, and your own president. There's nothing to see here. This didn't happen. There was no pedo ring. I should not be in prison. That's exactly what will happen there. But let's move on to, because there's nothing. That's Ghislaine Maxwell coming out saying, people are freaking out saying, oh, she says she's going to tell everything. What is she going to tell you? She's going to tell you absolutely nothing. Let's move on to Dan Bongino on this one, because Dan Bongino, the reports are that Dan Bongino is potentially going to be resigning from the FBI as deputy director over this saga. Apparently the saga in particular with Pam Bondi. He's really angry with Pam and apparently her handling of the Epstein situation, coming out and saying there's files, they're on my desk, to no, we don't really have any to the fake photo op of all the files, to we don't really have any files, to basically who's Epstein? He killed himself. Oh, but he wasn't even anybody. And now the story is it's a Democrat plot, which I'll get to here in a second. That's what Donald Trump is accusing. But Dan Bongino says that he might be retiring or resigning from the FBI. And I think the reason for this is, the guy has a lot of money to lose on this. You take the job as, for one, he's a massive podcaster. He was a host on Fox News, and he's got a big show and a huge following, and he makes millions upon millions of dollars on his podcast. And one would think, probably accurately, that once you get a job in government, like deputy director of the FBI, when you leave government service, even though he's taken a major pay cut to work for the government, but he still has his empire, he still has people hosting his show, he still has, he's still making his money from the podcast. But one would think that if you were to take a job like that, when you got out, you would make even more money. You'd become even more valuable. People would really trust you because you were once the deputy director of the FBI. So you have a lot of authority. You could say a lot of things. But if people stop trusting you while you're deputy director of the FBI, because the one thing you promised everybody, the one thing that was promised, or several things that were promised just never came to fruition, and instead you helped in covering it up, then you pretty much watch your reputation and your ability to make money go down the drain. So your only real option is to feign being upset and to potentially resign, maybe actually resign. You could claim you're going to resign, but you really maybe need to actually resign in order for there to be some clout, and to say, I wasn't a part of this. I don't agree with this. I'm the truth teller here. Don't you worry. You can still trust me. Now, please, audience, please do not flee me the way Ben Shapiro's audience has been fleeing him. Trump says that Dan Bongino is not leaving. He says Dan Bongino seems fine to him.
Oh, I think so. I did. I spoke to him today. Dan Bongino is a very good guy. I've known him a long time. I've done his show many, many times. And he sounded terrific, actually. No, I think he's in good shape.
Okay, so he thinks he's not going anywhere. Tucker Carlson says Dan Bongino got screwed essentially by Pam Bondi, and he has a lot to lose. Here it is.
Well, as we're recording this, Dan Bongino is threatening to resign if Pam Bondi does not resign as AG. What does that tell us, in your opinion?
Well, it tells us that Dan Bongino got shafted, completely shafted. And I'm saying this as a friend of his and someone who respects and likes him, but also just as an observer, an informed observer of it. So Pam Bondi, who's, by the way, I don't hate Pam Bondi. She's a totally nice person. If she was here, you would enjoy, I don't know if you know her, but she's a very nice person. Not against Pam Bondi in the slightest. But the fact is, she got on television on Fox News and started saying stuff like, I've got the client list on my desk. And actually, no, you don't. And I've got thousands of videos of Epstein having sex with kids. Well, actually, no, you don't. Most of the material was commercial porn taken off his computer. Like, that's just not true. Why did she say that? Probably because she's insecure and she's trying to please the audience, I would expect.
Do you think Dan is upset because his integrity is being questioned now over her mistakes?
Oh my gosh. So you're Dan and you're a media figure and you've got one of the biggest podcasts in the country and you're making tons of money and you're having a great time, which he was. You just built this brand new studio in Florida. You work with your wife, who you really like, which she does. And you get the call saying you'd be deputy FBI director, and you're like, I love Donald Trump. I love this country. I will, cut my pay by into 1/10 of what it was. And I will leave my house and move to DC, which is a kind of prison sentence itself. And I will do this because I love the president. I love the country. And you're there a few months, and all of a sudden everybody thinks you're covering up Epstein's crimes. And it kind of wrecks Dan's career. Like, he can't go back. It's going to be very hard at this point. I mean, things may change, but as of today, pretty hard for Dan to go back to his podcast audience and be like, I'm telling you the truth, when they all think that he's covering up for Epstein. Who did that? Pam Bondi did that. And I don't know that she did it on purpose. I'm assuming not. I don't think she's a mean person. I've never gotten that sense. But for whatever reason, she went out there and said things that were not true, that she could not back up. And then they issued this memo thinking that it would clear everything up.
That was embarrassing.
And I guess they're just so dumb. They didn't realize that if you tell everybody you have the tapes of these crimes and then you issue a memo saying you're not going to prosecute anybody for the crimes, what are you saying? I'm covering up for the perpetrators of these crimes.
Okay. So I don't agree with Tucker on this one, that this is Pam Bondi's fault. I think Bongino has dug his own grave in a lot of ways. We all have seen the video of Dan Bongino saying he loves Israel. His passion is Israel and the defense of Israel. We've all seen that. And we also saw Dan Bongino go around saying Epstein killed himself, that he's seen the tapes. He's got the evidence now. Epstein killed himself. This is him talking about it.
There is more coming on the Epstein files. Listen, I know this is a hot potato for folks. I totally understand. My comments were clear. I'm not paid for my opinions anymore. I work for the taxpayer now. I'm paid on evidence. That's it. The evidence we have in our files clearly indicates that it was, in fact, a suicide. We do have video. It's not the greatest video in the world. I don't want to set expectations on fire. However, the video does show in that specific block that he goes in, made a phone call. You'll see 12 hours of guards going to basically check on him, come back. You'll see no one really comes out in that bay, in that area, than him. There's no one in there.
Yeah, they edited the files. It has now been shown that the footage that they gave us, that Dan Bongino was here talking about, was in fact edited, that they cut a minute out of it. It was edited in Premiere Pro. That has been shown. And here's Dan lying about it. I mean, or covering it up or whatever. I mean, he's losing his credibility.
When you combine that with the other evidence we will be releasing in the coming weeks, we're still finalizing some of the products. I think it's pretty clear. However, as I've clearly indicated in some of my tweets on my official account, listen, investigations, if new information surfaces in the future on any of these cases, we're always open. I'm just telling you, there's nothing there in the file at all that indicates anything other than, in fact, a suicide.
Yeah, I just don't think Dan recovers from this. I mean, I think he recovers about as well as Ben Shapiro. I think he shares audience with Ben Shapiro in the end, and that's kind of where he's at. And the GOP base moves on in a different direction. And they continue to embrace Tucker Carlson. His podcast shot up to number 2 after he made the comments at Turning Point USA. And I think Dan Bongino and all of these people who are sitting there now, and even Donald Trump covering for Epstein, say there are no files. Get that out of your head. Essentially, what are you people thinking of this Democrat conspiracy theory? I don't think they survive this that well. I just don't think that they do. Here's Kash Patel. I just want to show you a reminder of what Kash Patel once said about who had the files, who had the tapes.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book.
FBI.
But who? That is I mean,
that's under direct control of the director of the FBI. Just like the manifesto from the Nashville school shooting of the Catholic schools.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guess what? You're now the director of the FBI. So you were saying before you were director that the director had all of this, and now you're the director. And the letter that came out from the FBI, from the DOJ, from them together collaborating and saying, there's nothing to see here, folks, move along. And I'm sure they're getting that at the behest of the president. Donald Trump wants everybody to move along. This is what Donald Trump said in a large post. He says, what is going on with my boys, and in some cases girls? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more? They created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me. And now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? Yeah, because the Epstein files didn't only have you, Donald Trump, or people in the GOP, but it also has Democrats, a lot of powerful people. Remember Bill Clinton and the Lolita Express? How many times was he on it? So here he is trying to claim that Democrats made this. He's gaslighting people. He's trying to figure out a way, what is going to be the button. And this is the first time, I think, that I've actually seen Donald Trump unable to figure out what makes people tick. Because that's what he's trying to do here by saying, this was Hillary Clinton. This was Clinton and Obama and all of them, and they're doing this hoax. He's trying to tap into a sentiment in the base that gets them to go, oh, yeah, okay, you're right. I'm not going to fall for that. Screw the whole Epstein thing. That's a hoax. But that's not going to work this time around. So he's kind of floundering, trying to figure out what is going to be the button to push to get people to stop talking about the Epstein files and to stop bringing up the fact that the administration promised that we were going to be getting all of this and that there was going to be some accountability, and we're not getting any of that. So this is the first time I've really seen Trump kind of flounder. And he's, in my opinion, he's a genius when it comes to gaining an audience and saying the right things. And this is the one time when it comes to Epstein that he is not behaving like an audience maestro. He says they haven't even given up on JFK or Martin Luther King Jr. files, no matter how much success we've had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons. It's never enough for some people. We're about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. And we have so much more to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they've tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she's looking into as AG and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, Trump not reading the room. And this is the first time I've really seen him not read the room, well, in regards to Thomas Massie, he also wasn't reading the room, but he's going after Thomas Massie, many of us suspect, because Thomas Massie took on the Israel lobby in AIPAC and also challenges, Thomas Massie's been challenging large budgets forever. That's nothing new. And so what is it about Thomas Massie now that suddenly triggers Trump to create a big super PAC against him and and campaign against the guy? And the one thing that many of us are looking at as well, Thomas Massie took a stand against Israel and AIPAC, and he won. He beat them. And so now they're trying to take out the big guns and get Trump to go after him. But this is, Trump saying to everybody, get over it, move along. Look at this. Why are you saying this, Trump? Are you saying this because you used to party with Epstein? You're in the files. You don't want anybody to know about it. That's what Elon Musk asserted, that Trump was in the files. But look at this. Back in the day, Trump partying with Epstein. And even you'll notice in the tape, he points to a woman. And then he says to Jeffrey Epstein, she's hot. And then he whispers something in Jeffrey's ear that made Jeffrey absolutely stunned. Okay, so here it is. She's hot, he said. So Trump partying with Epstein. Is he potentially in the tapes? Epstein's former attorney, he actually says that that this is was put out there. Trump retweeted this, like as if this proves anything. But look at this. Trump retweeted. This is David Schoen. I was hired to lead Jeffrey Epstein's defense as his criminal lawyer 9 days before he died. He sought my advice for months before that. I can say authoritatively, unequivocally, and definitively that he had no information to hurt President Trump. I specifically asked him, oh, really? And we're supposed to believe that. Why would Epstein suddenly come out and say, yeah, I've got a bunch of dirt on the US president who's going to give Israel everything they've ever wanted? Why would he admit that? Why would he say, yes, I actually have this man on tape doing all these terrible things. I've been blackmailing him forever into doing things to the state of Israel. And guess what? He is. He would, of course, they have the guy. They have the main guy Trump has been doing everything Israel wants. He's been allowing them to take all the land. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He has been doing more. He is definitively, without a doubt, the single most pro-Israel president the United States has ever had. And we have him on tape partying with Epstein, pointing out women, saying she's hot, making Jeffrey Epstein, who's done loads of unspeakable deeds, keel over in shock. And you've got women why would Epstein or Mossad or any of them admit to Donald Trump being in the tapes? They're getting what they want from him. And now it's all being covered up, which is also what they want. They want Americans to stop talking about it. And now you've got Donald Trump doing again the bidding for Israel, trying to get us to move along. He's trying to say it's some Democrat hoax, even though Bill Clinton was much more implicated than he was in the files. So, I mean, this is, people are not going to drop this. They're not going to drop the Epstein files. The GOP base, they're not going to go along with this. Okay, yeah, nothing to see here. It's a conspiracy theory made up by the Democrats. And Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Donald Trump, they're all unfortunately now completely tainted by this. And I don't know how Dan Bongino recovers from this. I just don't think he's going to recover. But certainly, I don't think Donald Trump recovers from this either. I think that his base is feeling extremely betrayed. They thought they were going to get a president that was going to give the truth, and he's not. He's covering up for Epstein, and he's doing the bidding of Israel, and we're not getting anything America first at all. Blowing up Iran's nuclear infrastructure was not for America. That was for Israel. Killing the Palestinians in genocide is not for America. That is for Israel. Allowing Israel to annex all kinds of land, saying that you're going to rebuild Gaza into some sort of Mediterranean paradise, that is not for the United States. That is for Israel. Everything has been for Israel. And Americans have caught on to this. And they are now, especially the base has proven themselves to not just be a bunch of sycophant loyalists. They're instead criticizing the president. They're criticizing Dan Bongino. They're criticizing Kash Patel. And they're criticizing Pam Bondi. And all of it very, very much deserved. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show.
We're arriving at the important question here, which is, who is Trump protecting? Because he's clearly protecting someone. Is it himself? Is it someone in his family? We should explore that as we continue to notice patterns. Welcome back to the Epstein Files. So the Epstein files are triggering a worldwide response because, well, as you saw yesterday, too many countries are indicated. I'm talking in just yesterday's episode, we already covered Ukraine, Iran, Lebanon, the United States, France, Russia, and we are barely even scratching the surface, my friends. In fact, I didn't even mention yesterday that the country Liechtenstein, a tiny little dot in Europe, that was the country that Robert Maxwell was laundering his money through. So like when he was robbing the pensions, it was going through Liechtenstein and then to Israel. Everybody is involved in this. We're going to get into North Africa. By the way, another random fun fact that I didn't include in yesterday's episode. Guess which law firm represented Robert Maxwell? This is per Vanity Fair's 1992. They did this long profile regarding the mystery of Robert Maxwell's death. Check this out. It tells us in this article that Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, if that name is sounding familiar to you, that law firm is sounding familiar to you, it's because they are currently the law firm that is representing Blake Lively. Yeah, the article tells us that they represented Robert Maxwell. And yeah, they're now representing Ryan Reynolds in what the public is noticing might be a totally rigged game against Justin Baldoni. Does Israel have the courts? Who would have the power to rig something that's so obviously wrong? What's been happening in that case? Anyways, point that I'm making here is the world is a stage, my friends. It is a stage. And we should take a listen, by the way. President Trump yesterday explaining to the press who were asking him questions about the Epstein files. He then said this regarding the quote unquote hoax. Take a listen.
I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your attorney
It's a big hoax.
told you this was a hoax? What evidence?
No, it's not the Attorney General. No, I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Look, I'm happy to be stupid. I'm happy to be foolish. I was very happy to be a person in the basket of the deplorables. The ad hominem stuff doesn't mean anything to me, especially when it comes to a ring that involves harming children. Okay. I just think that this is so ridiculous to try to divide people and make it seem like it's a fight between the left and the right. It's not that. We are, in fact, not stupid, but we're happy to have you call those names. And when I hear him say that, it just inspires me more to look into this. I really think that nothing should commit us further to wanting to unpack the Epstein story than the amount of gaslighting that is currently taking place. So let's jump right back into it. We're going to unpack Epstein's story first because I want to keep us very focused. There's going to be so many names, so many things that are happening. By the end of this series, we're going to be speaking about Greek mythology, truly. And I want to make sure that we very early on establish some threads and some trends that you will see as we begin to weave this web, okay? Here are the indicators thus far. Identity laundering. That's a big piece of this. The ability for people to change their names and to go by different names, that we are seeing that already early in this story as we unpacked Robert Maxwell. You can keep this up, the slide up. The next is the Midas touch, okay? The Midas touch being this person was not qualified and yet they were touched. Somebody had their hand on them and they were pulled through the ranks. The third one obviously is sexual deviancy. Robert Maxwell, we've talked about him already. An element of theater, you could also say that's a part 2 that goes along with the identity laundering. They're becoming different people with different stories. It's very gypsy, okay? And the last piece of this is historical revisionism, telling us not to remember what happened yesterday. Rewriting. This is when publications get involved, constantly changing somebody's name, helping them and telling us, don't remember what happened yesterday. This is what we're telling you the present is now. So we've already discussed Epstein's bizarre life story, but we're going to do it again here because now we are in the series officially. And as you know, the indicators, which we've identified in the Robert Maxwell story, are plenty here in the Epstein story as well. His story begins in 1953. And don't worry, I've created a timeline for you guys at home. I know some of you guys like to freeze and go through the timelines. It was in 1953 that Jeffrey Epstein is born. We are told that Jeffrey Epstein spent his childhood in Brooklyn, a part of the Seagate neighborhood, which has a population that is 80% Orthodox Jews of Russian origin. Okay, so they're coming in and they're settling in Brooklyn. That's going to be relevant for later in this episode, so I want to remember that. And similarly, we heard about this when we discussed Robert Maxwell yesterday. His parents were Seymour Epstein, who was a city parks department employee, and Pauline Epstein, who was a school aide. We're told that he was the product of middle-class New York City. That's the same story we're told all the time. All of these refugees didn't have much, and then they're just all going to become very wealthy in a very short amount of time. Millions and sometimes billions. We know that he attended local public schools before he entered Lafayette High School, which is in South Central Brooklyn. That is, in fact, a photo of Jeffrey Epstein that we have here on the screen. Somebody had included this and said, Epstein signed my dad's high school yearbook and wrote "Be Cool" in his yearbook. So that is Jeffrey Epstein. And then we are told that he reportedly graduated several years early. Okay. I don't know how early. Was he a freshman and then they just took him out? But we do know that he next appears in 1969. Jeffrey Epstein enters the prestigious Cooper Union College, but then suddenly and inexplicably, he drops out, just drops out. Then he enrolls again in 1971 in the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences at NYU. And he is there in 1971 to study the mathematical aspects of cardiac physiology. That's very specific. But guess what? He doesn't make it to the end because he drops out. He drops out of the Courant Institute. Again, we're not given a reason why. It's inexplicable. What we do know is that in 1973, Donald Barr, who we've discussed, he was then the head of the prestigious Dalton School, publishes this mysterious book, Space Relations. We talked about this. And this book is foretelling about a sexual blackmail ring, children that are going to be molested, all to serve this demonic space colony known as KOSSAR, KOSSAR, guys, not to be confused with KZARs, okay? They're involved in sex trafficking, and for whatever reason, it's this really disgusting book that the head of a school decided to publish in 1974, not creepy at all, and it foretells the story of Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, what I didn't tell you before is that it should be mentioned that Donald Barr was a member at that time of the Office of Strategic Services in America, that the OSS was what became the CIA. It's the predecessor of the CIA. Okay? So you've got this guy who is an agent for the government who's publishing this book foretelling of a sex trafficking ring, a powerful colony that believes that it sits above everybody else. And yeah, then what happens? I'm also going to note for you that Donald Barr, because we've got one element of this, is like changing identities. And one way you can change your identity is to just be baptized into a church. That's something that my research has made me understand. A lot of baptism, name changes. Donald Barr also was raised, he was Jewish parents, and then he decides to convert to Catholicism. So he converted to Catholicism, but he is ethnically, he is Jewish. And so would therefore his son, William Barr, be as well. Of course, it's relevant to the story as we are warming up on learning about the Mossad and Israel. Now let's get back into Epstein's timeline. 1974, it's a few months after dropping out of the Courant Institute. Inexplicably, Epstein's then hired at that Dalton school, where our government guy got weird fantasies and books that he's publishing, is heading up the school. And why is Epstein hired? Well, he's hired to teach mathematics and physics, despite not having a degree in either. Prestigious school, $50,000 a year. By 1976, Epstein is dismissed from teaching at the Dalton School. Parents were complaining about the weakness of his teaching. It also was alleged by the students that went there. NPR did a long article that he was often in the company of young girls, that he's taught outside of the school. And this is a blurb from a New York Times piece. 8 former students who attended the prestigious school during Mr. Epstein's short tenure there said that his conduct with teenage girls had left an impression that had lingered for decades. One former student recalled him showing up at a party where students were drinking, while most remembered his persistent attention on the girls in hallways and classrooms. She said, "I can remember thinking at the time that this is wrong." That is a quote from Scott Spicer, who graduated from Dalton in 1976. Well, no matter, because, then he left. And in 1978, the legend goes, kind of hand of Midas, touch of Midasing all of this. Legend goes that through a connection at the school, he was tutoring someone's kid, and then he somehow gets into the situation where he meets the CEO of Bear Stearns. That CEO is Alan Greenberg, who then decides to make him a junior assistant on the trade floor, because he obviously knows nothing about finance. I don't even know if there's anything about math or science either. But within just 4 years, he rises through the ranks and becomes a partner. He is a limited partner at Bear Stearns. What? Don't worry, guys. By 1981, he departs Bear Stearns, and I'll tell you why. Some employees, by the way, say that he was fired, but Jeffrey Epstein has always maintained that he resigned out of his own free will after a relatively minor violation with the SEC that resulted in a relatively minor fine of $2,500. That's his story, and he's sticking to it, or he was sticking to it, or he is sticking to it. Who knows if he's alive? But curiously enough, his departure coincided with the opening, the very day that Jeffrey Epstein left. The SEC was actually opening a procedure to look into insider trading that they alleged had occurred in the context of a corporate takeover bid that was being led by Edgar Bronfman Sr., who was the head of Seagram's. Now, if that name's sounding familiar to you, Edgar Bronfman Sr., it's because yesterday I told you not to forget this name. I told you to remember the name Edgar Bronfman Sr. because he was the guy that was working at this time with Robert Maxwell, because he was also heading up the World Jewish Conference, and he was working with Robert Maxwell on the Refusnik crisis. Essentially, we want Russian Jews to come settle into Israel. The Russian government says, no, you can't do that. Why would we just grant visas for everybody to travel to Israel? I want to be clear, in this very year, in 1981, that is when Edgar Bronfman becomes the president of the World Jewish Conference and focuses on that project to lobby Russia to grant visas to Russian Jews to depart to Israel. And you have to ask yourself, now we know at that same time he's working with Jeffrey Epstein, and the SEC is looking in going, wait, I think some insider trading just happened here. You have to wonder what suddenly then convinces the Russians to allow that to take place. Or what convinced, by the way, the Russian Jews, for that matter, to want to abandon their homeland to move to the Middle East. Was there an incentive provided? Was there a financial incentive provided? I'm just asking questions. Was Robert Maxwell the only Israel firster hotshot that was committing financial crimes to help Israel? Because remember, he's robbing pensions. What's going on over here with these banks that are getting into trouble? I will note now that per a 2003 Vanity Fair article, the SEC never officially brought the proceedings against Bear Stearns for insider trading, but its questions seem to indicate that it was remarkably skeptical. The SEC body was remarkably skeptical of Epstein's answers. Vanity Fair writes that some sources wondered why, if he had such an important role at Bear Stearns, he's a partner, why would he have left over just a small fine of $2,500? Something else was clearly going on there. Now, next part of Epstein's biography gets a little bit murky. And I want to tell you, by the way, what he was interested in. That's kind of like, what was his public life profile? You know, he had all of this money. We don't really know how he has it or how he gets it, but he's everywhere. And I'll tell you some things that he was passionate about. He's a passionate guy. He was passionate about issues relating to human consciousness, brain function, and also particularly transhumanism. Gosh, this is really becoming a theme, transhumanism. He had spoken about how he planned to freeze his body to be reanimated in the future when science allowed it. And he envisioned the insemination of dozens of women with his sperm in order to, quote, strengthen the genetic heritage of the earth. Now, I'm just going to park right here and just say that if that sounded like I could have been reading ideas from Elon Musk. It just, that is something that he talks about a lot. He's interested in human consciousness. He's kind of doing this. And I have always maintained that there's something weird about Elon Musk's background. It gives me the Midas touch. It just doesn't. When I watch him speak, I just don't buy it. But parking aside, these were Epstein's ideas, not Elon Musk. They just would have been kind of the same. And that's what he wanted to do, this just to strengthen the genetic heritage of Earth, to inseminate dozens of women with his sperm. And he supported, therefore, germinal choice, which is a sperm bank of Nobel laureates. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein also, in this capacity, gave, of course, tens of millions of dollars in donations to Harvard. I say, of course, because as we have learned, Harvard is running some sort of a Mossad operation. I feel very confident to state that it's very clear to me and that you are seeing all of these people that are going through Harvard, mysteriously getting in, not very bright people, and suddenly put into positions of power. So I think that is a fair thing to surmise. I'll say it's my opinion. Better be careful because Harvard's coming down on speech at the moment. Now, he then made, Jeffrey Epstein, some curious donations, given the fact that he does not have any children. He donated $25,000 to a children's tennis club in Maryland. He donated $30,000 to a preschool in New York. He donated $15,000 to a private girls' school that is a stone's throw away from his New York mansion. In 2017, he made another $50,000 donation, this time to the UJA, which is the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies of New York. And they are openly committed to world governance. They are openly committed to establishing this one world government. Epstein also gave to a ton of politicians. I'll give you some of them right here. Some interesting names on this list. You can look through this. But yeah, President George H.W. Bush definitely stands out. Former Secretary of State John Kerry stands out. I know the Clintons are on the list as well. Governor John Kasich is on this list. Senator Chuck Schumer is on this list. It is quite telling. He primarily gave to Democrats, but it is quite telling which Republicans he decided to give to. Former Senator Bob Dole. It's definitely something that I think deserves, somebody should definitely prod that narrative and see what motivated him to give to these people, especially in states that he didn't live in. Now, jumping back into our timeline, 1981, this is this big year, right? You've got him with Edgar Bronfman. Edward Bronfman is working factually with Robert Maxwell, and that was also the year 1981 that began the Iran-Contra affair that we discussed yesterday. The Iran-Contra affair is what connects Epstein to Robert Maxwell, not just via Edgar Bronfman, but also through the Refusenik scandal, but also, as Ari Ben-Menashe told us, the insistence at that time was coming from Robert Maxwell in his office in London, telling them that they needed to just let Epstein into the arms discussion, right? Let Epstein into this, include him. Your bosses have told you this guy is good, and now you've got to include him on these arms deals. And Ari Ben-Menashe was like, even though we were instructed to, we thought he was an idiot, we thought he was incompetent, and so we did not involve him. But yes, he ended up getting together a nice little business of blackmailing American politicians. Okay. What happens in 1987 then is kind of relevant because it is rather appropriately a British defense contractor. His name was Douglas Leese. Okay. So someone who contracts weapons and technology to a nation's military. It was him, Douglas, who recommended Jeffrey Epstein as a genius with no morals to Stephen Hoffenberg. Stephen Hoffenberg was the CEO of a financial company called Towers Financial Corporation. Okay. So we should just acknowledge right now, make it clear that before we get into what happens with Towers Financial Corporation, what Ari Ben-Menashe told us is obviously true. I'm just trying to help out this administration, by the way, because they're saying they don't know whether or not Jeffrey Epstein was tied to another government. They have no idea if he was working for another government's secret service. They have no idea if he had ties to intelligence services elsewhere. This is the answer. If I can do this from my house, I feel like maybe the feds could do this. Maybe start with Ari Minaj, who's on record saying that. Maybe start with these other people who are telling you how they're connected. Start with Bronfman, look into that whole thing. I'm just trying to help out the United States government here. Anyways, this confirms that what Ari Minaj said was true, that Robert Maxwell got Jeffrey Epstein involved in weapons. And Vicky Ward, by the way, who is a journalist, reported also that Epstein had operated on behalf of the Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. Now, if you're remembering the whole Khashoggi thing, you're like, oh, I remember that name, Jamal Khashoggi. It was like the quote unquote journalist that did not, brutally was murdered. He was a quote unquote, just a Washington Post columnist, Jamal Khashoggi. No, he was not. He was not just a Washington Post columnist. His uncle, Adnan, and this is according to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Report, was cited as one of the largest drug exporters from Colombia in the 1980s and the 1990s. And also Viktor Ostrovsky, we mentioned him yesterday. He is the guy that defected from the Mossad. He also claimed in his book that Adnan's loyalty, however, was not to Saudi Arabia, but was actually to the Mossad. He was apparently a long-time recruit of the Israeli Secret Service. Okay. So it is very clear that Jeffrey Epstein was working with, for, and around the Mossad. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense to pretend that he wasn't. Maybe this also explains why he had a Saudi passport. Again, if we're able to figure this out from home, do we really think that Trump and the administration and Pam Bondi with all the files before them can't do that as well? Anyways, back to Tower Financial Corporation. Jeffrey Epstein's now there. A defense contractor recommends that he gets that position. And what happens is that it becomes one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in United States history. The biggest until Bernie Madoff would come years later. So Stephen Hoffenberg, the CEO, who at the time when this Ponzi scheme was going down, ended up going to prison for crimes related to their schemes and the bank's eventual collapse because of it. It's a Ponzi scheme. There's a massive collapse, right? He claimed that while at the bank, it was actually Epstein. It was Epstein that, quote, was very heavily involved in the illegal side of the company, from money laundering to espionage to arms trafficking. Most of this work was criminal. After that, Epstein was able to finance his criminal enterprise, the financial trust company, and J. Epstein and Company. There was another one, I think it was called International Asset Collections. He was able to finance all of that with the assets and money from the Towers financial crimes, end quote. So yeah, but Jeffrey Epstein, regarding Towers going down, the Ponzi scheme, Jeffrey Epstein did not go down with them, because in 1993, Jeffrey Epstein left the Towers Financial Bank just before its collapse. So yeah, while Stephen Hoffenberg then spent 18 years in prison as the mastermind of the Towers Financial Corporation fraud, he actually claimed that it was Epstein who was the mastermind. He actually tried unsuccessfully to sue Epstein 3 times after he was released from prison in 2013. He said Jeffrey Epstein was the true architect, and Jeffrey Epstein had manipulated him. I got to tell you, I tend to believe that, given what we are seeing, these patterns. Yeah, I would think that someone sent him as an agent. I mean, the defense contractor, definitely hire this guy, you can trust him. And then Jeffrey Epstein is actually working on behalf of who? Maybe not your company, maybe not America at all. These financial crimes, this pattern, Robert Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, we are seeing it's very clear they're robbing the piggy bank. The people that suffer are the people whose pensions it was when Robert Maxwell robbed the pension funds of the Mirror Group. In America, the same thing. You know, when these Bernie Madoff scams, and they say, "Oh, the money's all gone, and your entire savings has been depleted, but you know, you're just gonna have to work harder." I think we can probably stop there in the Jeffrey Epstein story, because next we need to get into his mysterious relationship with Leslie Wexner, because it's a very odd relationship. And I have to tell you, we are not really privy to much since they're locking everything down. But years later, when Jeffrey is actually being deposed related to his crimes with minors, it is interesting to hear and to think about the questions that the prosecutor is asking him throughout the deposition. Take a listen to this clip of Jeffrey Epstein being deposed.
Do you consider yourself to be bisexual? No. Okay. In any event, you did develop a sexual relationship with Leslie Wexner at some point in time. Is that true? No. Mr. Epstein, how long have you been sexually attracted to underage minor females?
Objection, harassing, argumentative.
Are you kidding? Oh, I mean, I don't feel like I'm divulging any secrets here, right?
Move to strike.
Mr. Epstein, were you sexually abused as a minor?
Again?
Were you sexually abused as a minor?
You know, I'd like to respond to all your, if any, questions seem to be relevant, but I would like to respond to any relevant question at this time. However, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to the questions relevant to this lawsuit today. I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, then, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right to the United States Constitution.
Now, of course, it is a legal strategy, especially when you know they're cooking up that he's just going to sign a plea deal and get away with it and then just be running the sheriff's office in Miami. It is a strategy to say, just plead the Fifth about everything. But if my lawyer said plead the Fifth about everything, and some questions were just so absurd, like, okay, no, obviously. Well, but why? What made the prosecution ask him whether or not he had a sexual relationship with Lex Wexner? What did they know? What became apparent when they were looking before them and they were trying to charge him, and then somebody comes in, the hand of Midas, and says, leave that guy alone. He's ours. What made them ask that question? It's a very specific question. Do you have a sexual relationship with Lex Wexner? It's a very specific question to ask him whether or not he was molested in his youth. Oh, that's very interesting. And there's a lot more that we have to unpack. But I wanted to leave time today to take a look at what could possibly be motivating Trump in this moment, because it is very, very relevant, I think, to consider that question. First, I want to throw it to our sponsors. I've told you guys about preborn before, and I told you again that I am pro-life, and that means I stand with mothers before their baby is born and long after, and that's exactly why I've partnered with Preborn. Preborn isn't out to judge women. They're just making motherhood possible for them. They provide free ultrasounds. They share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And most importantly, they stay after the baby is born with real practical support by giving expecting mothers diapers, baby clothes, and even housing and financial help for up to 2 years after the baby is born. That is what true Christ-centered compassion looks like. And here's how you can be a part of it. With just $28, you'll give a mom a free ultrasound, one chance to see her baby. And when she does, she is twice as likely to choose life. Preborn is on a mission to save 70,000 babies this year. So don't just say that you're pro-life, live it. Donate now. Just call 855-601-2229. Again, the number is 855-601-2229. Or you can visit preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. Also want to tell you guys about beekeepers, because as a mom of 4 young kids, life is constantly on the move. There's school drop-offs, there's work, travel, play dates, and let's be honest, there are germs everywhere. That's why I'm so thankful for Beekeepers Naturals and their amazing Propolis throat spray. If you haven't heard of Propolis, it's this natural immune supporting substance that bees make to protect their hives. It's like nature's own shield, packed with antioxidants and over 300 beneficial compounds. It's been used for centuries to help support immunity, soothe scratchy throats, and keep you feeling your best. I use Propolis throat spray, especially during travel or school season. It's clean, natural, and it's free from all the junk that you can't pronounce. There's no dyes, no chemicals, and no fake sugars. Beekeepers Naturals recently launched a kid-friendly version of their nasal spray as well. The mist is super soft and it's gentle, so kids will actually use it. And so whether you're a busy parent or just want to support your immune system, there is a natural way, and this is absolutely a game changer. Today, Beekeepers Naturals is offering you an exclusive offer. You can go to beekeepersnaturals.com/Candace, and you can enter code Candace to get 20% off your order. Beekeepers Naturals products are also available at Target, Whole Foods, Amazon, CVS, and Walgreens. That is beekeepersnaturals.com/Candace. And be sure to enter code Candace at checkout. All right, so who is Trump protecting? You have to wonder. I don't believe, and I know that some of you guys were in the comments, you're really mad at me about this, by the way. I said, I don't believe that Trump is in the Epstein files. You're like, Candace, come on. He's obviously in the Epstein files. And I maintain, I am being genuine with you when I say that I really do not think that Trump is in these files in a way that he's nervous about coming out. I just don't see that. I do believe, however, that he could be motivated to protect someone else that is, or to protect somebody else who would be implicated by this blackmail scandal. He definitely is somebody that I think would move mountains to protect his children. And I would almost say, especially Ivanka. I don't think Ivanka Trump is in the files. I don't think that she's caught on camera doing anything, but there is something about this story of Jared Kushner and Ivanka that is now making me uncomfortable. And what I'll tell you is that throughout the first term, and I was very much around them, and I will say this, Jared and Ivanka are lovely people. They are very kind, and I'm not covering them to pretend that they've ever done anything wrong that I know about. But I think it made a lot of people in the MAGA movement uncomfortable that Jared was so intimately involved, right? He was the person that had Trump's ear, right? There is the king, and then there is the person who whispers into the king's ear. The king's advisor holds a lot of power. There are books about that, this is who the president was. This is who actually held the power. I think it's called like Friends of the President or All the President's Friends. I can't remember the book. But anyways, Jared was that person. Everybody knew that if you wanted to get something done, you went through Jared. Okay, Jared was running the White House the first term. He just was. And his demeanor is such that when he was doing it, he was doing a very good job because everybody likes Jared, which is to say that he doesn't ruffle any feathers in the process. And what I think bothered me was Jared had so much power and he got a lot done that he wanted through President Trump. But then when Jared left his post at the White House, suddenly we learn that Saudi Arabia injects $2 billion into his fund. Okay, this is a headline in the Wall Street Journal. Jared Kushner's new fund plans to invest Saudi money in Israel. Okay. And the small print there reads, the fine print, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund committed $2 billion to Mr. Kushner's affinity partners. That's the name of his fund, agreeing to allow investment in Israeli firms for the first time. So that happens as soon as he leaves the White House. And then you go, okay, your father is running again and Ivanka's nowhere to be seen. When I say nowhere to be seen, I mean that even in the lead up, okay, that's fine. You say you want to leave politics and that was the official story. You just want to spend time with your family. But she was so unaffected by the 2024 race that she didn't even dedicate a post to like voting on the night of the election. I'm not kidding. The night before the election, I don't know if you guys remember this, Ivanka took to X while everyone's worried about whether or not we're going to have a country. Like, the panic that you feel when you're a citizen, and it matters who's going to lead this country. Like, it actually matters. So whether you were hoping for Kamala, I certainly wasn't, or whether you're hoping for Trump, the idea that the other person could win, people had anxiety. I had anxiety about the future for my children. I was like, if we may not have a country in 4 years. Not Ivanka. She didn't even say like, hey, I'm going to stay out of it, but vote who you want to vote. She did a birthday tribute to herself. She did the night before. She had a birthday. This was the post the night before the election. And she wrote, this past week, I turned 43. So it wasn't even like it was her birthday eve. It was like the week before she turned 43. And then she wrote, reflecting on life's lessons, here are some truths that I've learned along the way. 1, family and friends are everything. 2, forgive people. It frees you. 3, everyone's a teacher. 4, avoid lashon hara, which is gossip. 5, trust yourself. 6, nourish your body. 7, get sunshine. I'm like, wow, that's nice. That's nice. And night before, like, that's what's concerning you. We're all on edge. We're all biting our nails off here. And she's, like she's on Zanga from the 2000s, like she's coming up with these quotes that you put on your AIM profile when you're away. You just discovered quotes.com and you got to make a AIM away message or make a profile because you just broke up with your boyfriend when you're 13. It just missed the mark, and then I realized, wow, this means that she is not impacted one way or the other. It means that they have classed into that part of society where elections don't matter because your family's good. Your family is good either way. And I had that thought. I said, well, yeah, Jared just got $2 billion. Now you guys are gone. You don't even care about whether or not you don't even care if your father wins this election. You're not even saying go vote. There's nothing. There was no work that was done. And so regarding the money, you would think after being in the office and speaking to your father-in-law that maybe that money would be coming to America in a big way. Well, Forbes did a deep dive on where that money was going. This was the headline. It was why Jared Kushner will become a billionaire no matter who wins. That was the energy that I got from her post. Doesn't matter. And in that article, it tells us, quote, Affinity had a slow start, deploying almost no capital in its first year while Kushner learned the ropes and navigated a turbulent pandemic market. But it's since picked up the pace and has now invested about $1.6 billion in at least 8 firms in Brazil, Germany, Israel, the US and UK, and the UAE in industries ranging from finance to energy. Its most notable investments so far are the ones that it made in Israel. In September of 2023, Affinity announced a $110 million deal for a 15% stake in the automotive and credit business of the conglomerate Shlomo Group. It was the first ever known investment by Saudi and Qatari wealth funds in Israel. I'm just going to LOL that because I'm funded by Qatar. Okay, take down Candace Owens. It's just like Israel does deals with Qatar the whole time. That's the point here. They say it's significant because neither Gulf state has diplomatic relations with Jerusalem, and Kushner had to obtain waivers from both governments to make that happen. So he is acting as an intermediary between Qatar and Israel and getting this deal done, right? While the rest of us are being accused of being funded by Qatar for some reason, I guess this is fine. Like the Zionists are fine with this. The Shlomo deal, tells us, was closed in January, and 6 months later, Affinity bought some $130 million in shares of the publicly traded Israeli financial services from Phoenix Financial. And this is what Jared had to say about that. He said, quote, it's only brought me closer with my investors. The fact that I'm investing Gulf money into Israel post October 7th, that's very important. We need to bring everyone together, he said. Okay, I really do wish that money was being invested in America, again, because you used the office to facilitate deals that would help you and your family. Of course you did that. But what's also striking is Jared's post, because then you wonder, okay, what is his vision after October 7th? We know what it is because really just a few months after October 7th, Jared was on the stage at Harvard, of course, and he had this to say about October 7th. Again, just a couple of months after, nobody knew what was going to happen. We were told they were just going to quick military response in Gaza. Now we realize it's an ethnic cleansing. They are intentionally it's a demolition. It's just a controlled demolition, essentially, is what we're looking at. They're demolishing everything in sight. And this is what Jared Kushner had to say on stage at Harvard just a couple of months after. He apparently maybe saw that demolition before the rest of us. Take a listen.
I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
That's like very nice way of saying ethnically cleanse the region, clean it up, and then we've got some valuable property. We've got some valuable waterfront property. Then we know Trump's then talking about building Trump hotels, and it really, really makes you wonder. Okay, that was February 15th, 2024. And he already had a real estate vision for people being moved out of Gaza. So we go back to our indicators, right? Our indicators. Do we have that, guys, from the beginning? We were talking about this. Identity laundering, the Midas touch, sexual deviancy, theater, historical revisionism. And regarding the Midas touch, apparently it has been reported, and this was not a political report, by the way. This was done in 2006, before Jared Kushner was in the public domain. There was this guy who said that, yeah, Jared Kushner got into Harvard because of this Midas touch. They were saying that he did not have the grades to get into Harvard. I'll tell you about this guy. This guy's Dan Golden. He wrote a book back in 2006 called The Price of Admission. He was investigating at that time, again, not related to politics, left or right. He just thought it was interesting that there were so many of these people going to Harvard that were underqualified. He was investigating why so many of the elite children get into Harvard, despite not having the academics to do so. And Jared Kushner came up in his investigation naturally. And according to him in his research, he writes, quote, New Jersey real estate developer Charles Kushner, that's Jared's father, we're going to talk about him in a second, had pledged $2.5 million to Harvard University in 1998, not long before his son Jared was admitted. to the prestigious Ivy League school. At the time, Harvard accepted about 1 of every 9 applicants, he writes. He then went out and spoke to the former administrators of Jared's high school about this peculiarity. You decide to donate before your son is, deciding that he wants to go there. He's about to apply. And he tracked down a former administrator of Jared's high school, that's Frisch School. And in his book, he quotes the administrator as having said, quote, "There was no way anybody in the administrative office of the school thought that he would, on the merits, get into Harvard." That's a former official, again, of the Frisch School in Paramus, New Jersey. The administrator goes on to say, quote, "His GPA did not warrant it. His SAT scores did not warrant it. We thought for sure there was no way this was going to happen. And lo and behold, Jared was accepted." Okay. So Charles Kushner, then he does more work, discovers that he is on the board of something at Harvard or on some commission at Harvard along with his wife, and that they were allowed to be on that commission despite the fact that by then he had already been found guilty of financial crimes. And so what are we looking at here? Again, it's one of these stories. We came from Russia and then suddenly we had millions of dollars within a couple of months. Just hard work pays off, man. What can I tell you? We just worked really hard. Fortune. That's the Kushner family story. It's an interesting one. And when you talk about sexual deviancy and blackmail, I am really questioning why on earth Trump thought it was appropriate to name Charles Kushner as the ambassador after granting him a pardon as the ambassador to, of course, France. Because what do we know for a fact about Charles Kushner? Well, we know that when he went to prison, it was for tax evasion and for witness tampering. And if you're wondering whether or not he was guilty, and you don't know how disgusting this story is, the attorney general at the time who put him away was Chris Christie, attorney general of New Jersey. And I never knew the backstory of that, of what Charles Kushner did. And it is, I'm just going to let you listen to Chris Christie tell it, because Margaret Hoover was questioning him on PBS's firing line. This is a journalist, Margaret Hoover. And she was asking Chris Christie about that time he put Charles Kushner into prison. Take a listen.
I was surprised that you didn't give yourself more of a defense for prosecuting Charles Kushner in the book.
I just think that it was so obvious he had to be prosecuted that, I mean, if a guy hires a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law and videotapes it and then sends the videotape to his sister to attempt to intimidate her from testifying before a grand jury, do I really need any more justification than that? I mean, it's one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes that I prosecuted when I was U.S. attorney. And I was U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Margaret, so we had some loathsome and disgusting crime going on there. But I just laid out the facts, and any objective person who looks at the facts knows, confronted with those facts, I had a moral and an ethical obligation to bring that prosecution.
Like, I know a lot of people have beef in their family. Like, we got family issues. Everybody got family issues. This is not your regular family issue. Could you imagine this? Your sibling is getting in trouble for tax evasion. You have information that the government wants pertaining, so they want to make you a witness. To stop you from being a witness, your brother goes to your husband, decides to hire a prostitute to seduce him, and video records your husband having sex with a prostitute. And then once he gets that recording, he goes to you and threatens you with it. I am speechless. More speechless that Trump granted him a pardon. And not only granted him a pardon, that's one thing, okay? You want to do favors? That's what pardons are all about at the end of your presidency anyway. Like, everyone does it by left and right. So, like, everybody's guilty for doing this. There's no one side is better than the other. They look out for their homies in the end. But to then give him the ambassadorship of France? Maybe he was overqualified for that, actually. Sexual deviancy. Maybe he was overly qualified for that position, but it makes you wonder why he wanted it. Why somebody that's in their 70s wants, and I don't know if he speaks French, maybe he does. Why would he want to be the ambassador of France? What are the perks of being an ambassador? Oh, you become an intermediary. I think that's some of the perks. But these questions should be asked now, because it seems like we have been completely played, and we are being played over something as sinister as crimes against children. We're being called stupid, right? We're being called weaklings for saying, excuse me, there's not just smoke here, there is fire. Now, I don't like it. I don't like Jared's involvement in the Middle East. I think it's a conflict of interest at best for Trump right now, that of what Ivanka and Jared are up to, their path to becoming billionaires is a conflict of interest at best. Who are they more loyal to? Who is Trump more loyal to? Is Trump more, are Ivanka and Jared more loyal to Israel? Is Trump therefore more loyal to his child, Ivanka, than he is to the United States? Are these fair questions? I think they are. Okay. Because now you're gaslighting us, and we're going to continue to ask these questions. Anyways, wondering what you guys think about all of that. There is no stone that I will leave unturned when it comes to harming children. This was the red line, and it is absolutely foolish for Trump to think that he can redirect the energy of MAGA somewhere else and tell us, oh no, don't look over there. Before I get into some of your comments, I'm going to remind you guys about American financing, because costs are still rising on everything: gas, groceries, and home repairs.
If this was a Democratic hoax, then they would have released it when Joe Biden was president. This is a major, major problem for them. Donald Trump's got something that is impossible to sell, even for the greatest salesman. He just can't sell this.
Well, recently, Dave Smith exploded guns ablazing against the Trump administration and Trump himself for engaging in what is obviously a cover-up regarding the Epstein story. He gets into what this is doing to Trump's base, effectively causing a schism and risking losing the entire MAGA coalition over it. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And before I'll get into a little bit here of Donald Trump's latest, which is, totally pathetic. But the final thing I'll say here, just on there might be, I've seen some people who have kind of had what I might consider like a little bit of a black pill take, where they'll say things like, it doesn't even matter. The elites don't even care if they can convince us anymore. They're just going to do it anyway. And they use as evidence, look, Trump's covering up the Epstein thing. Doesn't matter that all this is happening. But I think that is short-sighted. And I think it's a shallow understanding of what's going on here. I don't mean to be insulting to anyone who feels that way, but I'm just saying, I think all I'm saying is think it through a little bit more. Yes, it's true that they've lost the ability to control the narrative, and they're not just going to give up power because they've lost that. They're going to keep trying to pursue power. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a major, major problem for them. And I think it is. Let's just.
Yeah, I had to agree with him there, especially because of the fact that to exert political power, it actually takes a propaganda campaign where you win people over, not push them away. Yeah, they might maintain power, but they might also not be able to maintain a modicum of support for the rest of their agenda and the Trump administration agenda in general regarding immigration or tariffs or regulations and education. Everything else is at peril over this. So yeah, they can still hide it, and they might not care. But in some ways, I feel like they have to care still, even though we know this is a big political machine. It's the uniparty. Both sides are involved in the deep state. They still need support from their base to push forward what they want, and they can't get that when the inconsistencies are just too glaring, that this looks like too much of a cover-up, and I think you're seeing that.
First, pull up the tweet that Donald put, or the Truth Social, that he was getting ratioed on. And let me read it here. Okay, yes. The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again Just like with the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, which the Dems swore had come from Russia. No, it came from Hunter Biden's bathroom. And even the Russia scam itself, a totally fake and made up story used in order to hide crooked Hillary's big loss in the 2016 presidential election. These scams and hoaxes are all the Democrats are good at. It's all they have.
Listen to this. He's pinning the whole Epstein story on the fact that it was a Democratic hoax on the same playing field as Russiagate and the Hunter laptop cover-up and all these other things. The Democrats were silent about this issue, essentially, under Trump's first administration and all throughout the Biden presidency, whereas they really tried to end Trump's political career entirely, if not his life, which they tried to do too, over the Russiagate scandal. It's all we heard about for years. It seemed like that they had the biggest political scandal on their hands since Watergate, and Trump was implicated. He was a Russian agent. This is what they sold us. They didn't sell us that plus Epstein, plus there's a cover-up in the Epstein case and Trump is implicated. They never even tried to sell that. And even if you think that some of them, were involved in that, I think the reasons are clear is that their side's implicated too. And that's why they didn't make much of a stink about it then. And why, so many people are still seeking answers for it today.
Are no good at governing, no good at policy, and no good at picking winning candidates. Also, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters, very interesting line, my past supporters have bought into this bullshit hook, line, and sinker. Okay.
I can't believe this, that he would not only alienate the people that already have misgivings over how he's handling it, but also say it's only past supporters that are doing the Democrats' dirty work by mentioning this or bringing it up. And I'm sorry, polling data is showing at this point that it's not just some of the top influencers that have a problem with this. It's not just Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Matt Walsh and Steve Bannon and Alex Jones. It's like 83% of the polled electorate that I've seen so far. This is a sweeping issue, and it's really actually throwing some shade at the idea that all of MAGA is just a cult. I don't believe that. For all the cat turds and DC Dranos out there, you do have people pushing back at this, and for good reason. I can't see the PR endgame here for Trump to call his supporters that may have supported him over this for the idea that he was going to be transparent with this. Weaklings and losers and idiots doing Democratic dirty work, or that it's a hoax. It's too insane to even consider.
You could take it goes on and on like that. First of all, I found it very interesting that he addressed his past supporters. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know who exactly he's thinking of there, but it is a little bit strange coming off this Turning Point USA week where I don't know. I'm the only one I can think of who has been out there being like, I was a supporter. I am no longer a supporter. And not just that, but I went from being a supporter to you're my worst enemy. Now, to be fair to Ben Shapiro and Josh Hammer, I went from you're my worst enemy to a supporter to you're my worst enemy again. Fine, whatever. We've talked about this enough and we could get into it more. I think I was right. But it's a very strange move for any politician, even one who's in office and doesn't have to face re-election, to actually label you as their former supporters. This is strange, especially for Donald Trump, who's usually pretty good at this, if nothing else. It's so strange to almost be pushing them over to the enemy side. Hey, you, this huge chunk of my base who are upset over this, I'm kind of vaguely labeling you as past supporters.
Yeah, man, I could not agree with Dave more on this. This is the greatest take to bring from this new pivot that Trump is doing, that it's almost like you're trying to shoot yourself in the foot and jeopardize the whole rest of your agenda. I just don't see the point of it. I don't see the point of basically lumping these people in with the Democrats over what is clearly a cover-up. And in fact, if I wanted to maintain the cover-up and I was smart, I think I just wouldn't talk about this right now and hope that that would do more work in keeping this a secret from the public than what Trump's doing now, actually. And that's not what I want, obviously. But if I'm a strategist in that room telling Trump how to handle this, and yeah, it's like I want to cover up, this is like the last thing I would do. This is going to cause additional explosive tensions. And I think you're seeing them play out right now.
That is a weird reaction. And I think this really validates, maybe doesn't validate exactly what we've been saying yet, but it certainly indicates that they're feeling the same thing that me and Robbie have been saying on the show. Like, they also think this is a problem where he's losing support over this. But of course, this now, it seems like they've tried a few different angles on the Jeffrey Epstein thing. They're constantly contradicting themselves because they just don't know how to handle this. Because, you know, it's pretty obvious that they're covering up a giant intelligence operation that was a child rapist ring. And that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to write a press release for, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And both sides are implicated. I think that's why you saw silence during the Biden administration and silence during the first Trump administration and cover up now, is because too many parties are implicated in what obviously involved prominent people and the dealings of prominent people and money transfers between prominent people and sexual proclivities and potential drug use habits on prominent people. That's what Jeffrey Epstein even told a New York Times reporter in 2018. This reporter admitted this days after he died, that Epstein admitted to him that he had the dirt on politicians and their sexual preferences and their drug use habits. And I'm not saying, oh, just trust the New York Times. I'm saying that, hey, the New York Times is one of the biggest entities most likely to cover up for the regime, for the deep state, for the uniparty. And a reporter said that a few days afterward, before it became, you know, a completely politicized issue. So, yeah, I'm with Dave here. This is an obvious cover up, and there's just too many inconsistencies. These tall tales that we've told about, you know, the client list being on Bondi's desk, and all of a sudden, no, she just meant the files. And there are thousands of hours of Epstein molesting children. Nope, that all of a sudden was porn he downloaded without, you know, just knowing those basic facts. And then you're going to hand us this stupid video that no one buys because of 3 minutes cut out of it. And it's obviously a few files stitched together that's been determined. They won't answer that. There's just too much here for us not to keep focus on it. And how Trump just was so dismissive about it right away and wants this to go away. You know, he can't believe we're asking about Jeffrey Epstein. What are you talking about? The DOJ and FBI just released a memo saying that there's nothing there when there's clearly something there.
So first it's like, oh, we're going to get to the bottom of it. Then it's like, oh, the documents are on my desk and I just gave all the documents to these influencers. Then it was like, oh, I was tricked and those aren't actually the real documents, but there's tens of thousands of hours or thousands of hours, they said. So we got to go through all of it. Then it's, oh, none of that ever existed. There is no client list. There is no thing. This didn't happen. We're buried. He killed himself. Nothing to see here. Now the story is that it's actually a Democratic hoax, just like those other ones.
Which even that layer is another, you know, contradiction in the former narrative where there's nothing there. He's saying essentially there are files there and they're doctored and they're part of a Democratic hoax. Well, if that was true, why would the Democrats doctor documents and try to frame Trump for within the context of the Epstein saga within those documents and then just never release them? You know, the Biden administration did a lot of other stuff at the end of its term, like grant kind of blanket pardons to people like Hunter Biden and Anthony Fauci, but they wouldn't do this. Why? It's because that's not true. This is a farce. This is a cover-up. And again, both sides are implicated. I'm not just angry about Trump on this. I talked a lot about how Biden was pernicious in just not doing anything to reveal any information to the public, despite the outcry that people had toward transparency in this regard. And yeah, most Democrats were silent about that until now. I do think many of them are opportunistic, but I also think it's right to get to the bottom of this. I don't care who's behind it. I'll take anyone's support for this right now.
And man, do you have a big problem with that narrative. You have such a big problem with the narrative, because here's the thing. And I don't think anyone's really, well, there's been some other people who have covered it as well as me, but I've been up there with the people who have covered this really, really well for many years now. The thing is that all those things Donald Trump mentioned were Democratic hoaxes. A lot of them were Republican and Democratic hoaxes, intelligence agencies hoaxes, but no question. I mean, look, They framed Donald Trump for treason. The whole Russiagate thing was all made up. It was made up intentionally to sabotage his presidency. And as I mentioned before, explain away his victory, but really more primarily to sabotage his relationship with Vladimir Putin. Which, you know, you call a guy, you accuse a guy of being a Putin spy. Well, now he can't really work with Vladimir Putin, can he? That was a complete hoax. Obviously, the 51 intelligence agents saying that you could view it as a continuation of the Russia hoax, but saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was that, right, these are all Democratic hoaxes. Jeffrey Epstein isn't that. And here's one very easy difference between all of those things and Jeffrey Epstein, which again, no one's going to not see this because people aren't as stupid as you guys think they are, and we're kind of stupid, but we're not as stupid as you guys think we are. And like one thing that people will notice is like, okay, here's the thing about Democratic hoaxes. If you turned on CNN or MSNBC, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, or you looked at NBC, ABC, CBS, the Associated Press, Reuters, if you looked at them through all of 2017, 2018, 2019, they were all talking about the Russiagate stuff. Russia, Trump, Russia collusion. This was the narrative that totally swept over. When that debate happened at the end of 2020, all of them were talking about the 51 intelligence agencies, blah, 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 all of this. They went over it. They never stopped talking about it, pumped it out there. They used the propaganda. They buried the Jeffrey Epstein story. None of them wanted to talk about it. None of them were making any push. If this was a Democratic hoax, then they would have released it when Joe Biden was president.
Absolutely could not agree with Dave more. And when they were pretending that Trump was a Russian asset, he was actually supplying Ukraine with weapons, about $400 million worth of weapons, and funding the Aegis missile systems that can launch dual purpose weapons, including missiles that could be headed with an H-bomb. So it wasn't exactly even true back then, or even there was any modicum of truth to it, even back then. And what we know about it now is so much more in the area of hoax to try to take down Trump. But they didn't touch this. And Dave makes the perfect point there. They didn't even get within an arm's length of this thing, man. You've always been a conspiracy theorist to think that there's something to this that involves prominent people and blackmail and foreign intelligence services. We've always been told that. People on the populist right have always been told that. And rightly so, people on the populist right stood up and said, no, I refuse to accept this. I don't care what you call me. I just want transparency in this case. So this was driven by people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi that talked about this a lot. This wasn't the product of the Democrats in the same way Russiagate was.
But it wasn't. They were covering it up. This is not a Democrat hoax. None of the Democrats were trying to use Epstein as a political tool to hurt Republicans. When? Show me the example of it. This was never. There might be one random left-winger who points out that Trump was friends with Epstein, but that's the extent that they'd ever talk about it. They're not getting into the blackmail operation. I mean, maybe some of the anti-war leftists or something, but not the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, totally right. There were dissident leftists that, brought some of these issues up in the same way that the dissident right-wingers did and say, hey, Trump was friends with this guy from the 90s to at least the mid 2000s, and maybe there's something there. We should investigate that. There were those people, but certainly not the Democrats, certainly not crooked Hillary and Biden and Obama, who Trump's trying to blame, despite the fact it's him that's deflecting here.
Not the CIA. Is it not were you telling me that the CIA and the FBI and the establishments of the Democrat and Republican Party are trying to convince you that Israel set up a blackmail operation on U.S. soil that involves raping girls as they fund their war? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's happening. And this is this is the spot we're in. Donald Trump's got something that is impossible to sell, even for the greatest salesman. He just can't sell this.
Well said. All the polling data seems to indicate exactly what Dave Smith's saying here. Trump's having a very hard time keeping his base together on this. And it's not just activists. It's not just voters. It's like the top brass in the entire MAGA coalition. I named some of them earlier. Matt Walsh and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, have serious issues with this. Steve Bannon and how he's handling it. Some of them are willing to cross the line and, criticize Trump himself and say, hey, this is wrong. And they're not just willing to be like, oh, I'm just going to blame his subordinates. He's being controlled by, misguided forces, and it's not Trump's fault. Some of them are willing to really hand it to Trump over this, and I think rightly so. And what Dave Smith said there at the end is so true, how, much of Israeli intelligence operations going on in the context of Jeffrey Epstein and his sex trafficking ring whatsoever. No one touched it politically. The American people's memory is short, but people that actually have followed this stuff are going to be too smart to swallow this wholesale. I just don't believe they will. And of all the things that Trump has created some schisms within his base on in this term, whether it be, the big abominable bill, dragging Massey over that, dragging Elon Musk and lying and saying, hey, Elon just opposes this because he wanted EV subsidies, which he didn't, and he doesn't, and he never did, which was a lie. You had bombing Iran, which the neocons were all for. You had Levin and Shapiro out there shaking their fists and saying, yeah, regime change. And if you don't agree with it, you're anti-Trump. And, you're anti-MAGA. These were never Trump Republicans in 2016, remember? They're saying that now because they wanted that war. Well, a lot of Trump's base is non-interventionist, or generally non-interventionist, despite how much Netanyahu wanted that war. That was another source of a potential rift. Rearming Ukraine, that just came up in the midst of all this. It's kind of being, sidetracked and kind of ignored to some extent by the news cycle with dominance of the Epstein story, but that is causing a rift in Trump's base too. So out of all those things, this one seems to be the most severe for Trump to deal with because it involves too many lies, too many contradictions, even from within his own administration. It'd be one thing if they stepped in, told the same tale from the beginning that, hey, nothing existed in the Epstein case. We spouted off too much about that. We looked into it and, that it just wasn't the case. But instead of that, they held like PR circuses at the White House where Pam Bondi handed out those binders that said the Epstein files phase 1 on them, which not only was a farce because it only contained documents that had already been released, but it also implied a second round, a second phase of Epstein files. So from there forward, it was just a bag of walking contradictions for this administration on this topic. And for them to go back on so many things they had said just weeks prior, like Bondi was reviewing it for release. Alina Habba out there, Trump's lawyer in New Jersey, saying, when we release this stuff, it's going to shock the world. Some of these names on this thing. That's what they sold us. So it should be no surprise Trump is losing so much support for this. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that this is a serious scandal for Trump, that it's going to affect?
Kofi, follow me.